Shadow Hack. Chapter 721, The Dark Master. The battlefield was filled with smoke. The three Egyptian gods and dark demon god were exchanging blows. After a few moments, the only war god of the region, Horus, joined them as well. He was unable to ignore the dark demon god destroying the homes of the pharaoh's people. He definitely had to stop him. Although all what he had heard from Anubis before was completely in accordance to dark demon god's intentions, Horus could not continue on like that after seeing the dark demon god himself. He chose to stand on the side of the people. When Horus suddenly joined the battle to fight against the dark demon god, the head of the three Egyptian gods Ra was somewhat startled. Wasn't Horus refusing to comply with his orders before? Then why suddenly? Before the three gods could ask anything, Horus chose to speak up himself. You three should not get complacent. Ra, our debt will be settled later. I know who wants to subject the people of the two poles of morning and evening to a disaster and who is my enemy. With a long pike in his hand, Horus then attacked. Upon seeing it, the dark demon god became extremely delighted. The gods before him were only beautiful snacks in his eyes. While that was going on, Li Yunmu led him to a safe place and hurriedly asked, "You know where the pyramids are? I want to find the 1,000-year staff." Hasn't the 1,000-year staff already disappeared after summoning the dark demon god? I am not talking about that one. It is the staff which represents the supreme authority of Pharaoh King. Li Yunmu said indifferently. Adam sighed ruefully. Now my people are suffering. If it were not for the three Egyptian gods arriving on time, what could we have done? You speak quickly. That thing is important to me. Li Yunmu was beginning to grow anxious. After hearing him inquire about the divine staff's whereabouts, Adam sighed. It has been the emblem of us pharaohs for several generations, and it has always been used as an offering to the ancestors. It is also not called 1,000-year staff, but rather Millennium Divine Staff. Li Yunmu nodded. That's exactly what I want. Adam pointed at the pyramid not far away from them. That is where the Millennium Divine Staff is stored, but it is protected by the Sphinx Andrew. If you want to enter the pyramid, you must gain his approval. Li Yunmu didn't pay attention to Adam's words and rushed straight toward the pyramid. When he got close to it, he saw a sphinx before it. The instant Li Yunmu tried to enter the pyramid, the sphinx came alive and fiercely pounced on him. Who are you? You surprisingly dare to intrude into the pyramid. If you aren't a pharaoh, then you don't have the qualifications to enter. Li Yunmu frowned. If he had known that earlier, he would have brought Adam with him. That man was a pharaoh, after all. I am sorry, I didn't plan to intrude into the pyramid, but I have something important to do. I hope that you can let me go. Seeing that Li Yunmu didn't have the intention to leave, Sphinx Andrew did as his responsibility required and pounced on the intruder. Li Yunmu didn't move. A spike suddenly appeared behind him and turned Andrew's attack into nothing. It also threw him far away. Andrew was slightly startled. The intruder appeared to be immortal, so how could his strength be so terrifying? I don't want to injure you. Let me go inside. I truly have something important to do, so stop obstructing my path. I am the guardian here, this is my responsibility, Andrew bellowed. Li Yunmu's gaze suddenly turned cold, and he concentrated his strength in his fist. He then punched in the direction of the Sphinx. His punch could break through mountains and rivers, and the guardian Sphinx Andrew was blown into the sky, where it gradually winked away like a star in the night sky. Li Yunmu then advanced toward the pyramid step by step. On his way, he easily destroyed the defensive mechanism set inside the pyramid. There were funerary objects of generations of pharaohs on the lower level of the pyramid, and as Li Yunmu gradually advanced upwards, he saw a coffin of a pharaoh at every level. The mummies, however, seemed to be alive. The instant Li Yunmu had entered the pyramid, they began to grow restless. However, he didn't intend to attack them. He waved his hands and a wave of energy exploded them into dust. When Li Yunmu reached the top layer, he saw the Divine Millennium Staff. It was glowing brightly, and the difference between it and the previous staff was that there was a falcon head at the top of this scepter. This was the emblem of the Pharaoh's authority. Li Yunmu was about to take hold of the Millennium Divine Staff when a profound voice echoed in the building. If you want the Divine Staff, you must first remove my seal. Otherwise, you won't be able to obtain it. Li Yunmu couldn't help but frown when he heard the voice. He looked around and said, "Who is talking? Come out." Gradually 2 eyes appeared in the darkness at the top level of the pyramid, which frightened him somewhat. "Who are you?" A voice came from the direction of the eyes. "I am the Dark Master, sealed here to protect the Divine Millennium Staff." "Sealed? How should I open your seal? If I remove it, will I finally be able to get the Millennium Divine Staff? I need to get it, it's very important to me. If you can assist me in removing the seal, I will give you the Millennium Divine Staff," the Dark Master said in a profound voice. "All right. Then tell me, how should I remove your seal?" "On the 4 borders of 2 poles of morning and evening, my hands and legs are sealed. They are sealed inside cards, so you need to collect the 4 of them and return here, then my seal will naturally open. I just want to remind you that vicious characters are defending the 4 seal cards. If you are unable to beat them, then don't force yourself. I have to obtain the Millennium Divine Staff, so regardless of whatever I encounter, I will use my full strength." Li Yunmu said indifferently. "Then I wish good luck to you. I will wait for good news." Li Yunmu took a deep breath, then tried to pull out the Millennium Divine Staff a few times. But sure enough, he was unable to even shake it, just as the Dark Master had said, let alone talk about using it. Can the words of the Dark Master be trusted? Li Yunmu began to inquire about the authenticity of the Dark Master's words with the system. It doesn't seem that he is lying, but I've heard from the 3 Egyptian gods that this Dark Master is a dangerous person. Chapter 722, 4 Seals. Right then, Li Yunmu didn't care whether someone was dangerous or not. He had to obtain the Millennium Divine Staff to save Yuan Biyao. I am unable to take care of so many things. My first priority is saving Yuan Biyao. When the system saw Li Yunmu being so resolute, it didn't say anything more to him. Although it knew better, its every action was according to the host's choice unless he didn't want to return to the origin world again. The problem was that its resurrection was too far away. The system thus took a deep breath and said, "I hope you are successful." Li Yunmu nodded and said, "Why did they use card seals for the 4-way enchantment seal? I've heard of the Dark Master of 2 poles of morning and evening. His strength is extremely formidable, even surpassing that of Master Gods. The gods of 2 poles of morning and evening had jointly sealed him one day. After that, they split his body into 5 parts and sealed each card in a different location." Li Yunmu didn't know whether what he was going to do was right or wrong, but he only had a single thought in his heart at that moment, and it was to rescue Yuan Biyao regardless of the cost. He hurriedly advanced in the direction the Dark Master had told him. There was a pillar of light on the border, and it was surrounded by an enchantment. It should be here. The Dark Master's seal should be here. There was a golden box in the enchantment, and its appearance was very similar to one of the 1,000-year artifacts, which he had seen previously. The seal of the Dark Master was probably inside it, and Li Yunmu's heart began to beat with ecstasy. It was tantamount to getting one step closer to rescuing Yuan Biyao. But what made him despair the next moment was that he was unable to enter the enchantment. Damn it! This enchantment! Li Yunmu tried using all sorts of methods to break the enchantment open, but it didn't move a single jot. Although the guardian the Dark Master had warned him about didn't appear, the enchantment itself was already enough to give him a headache. You can't fool me anymore. This isn't some Dark Master's seal, but rather one of the 5 seals, the metal seal, right? Li Yunmu said gloomily. The system didn't say anything, because if the seal was opened, it could descend to the origin world once more. At that time, the entire world would be turned upside down. But how could any of the 5 seals be easy to destroy? In truth, the system was very clear in its heart that even if the 5 seals were destroyed, it would only fulfill the condition to awaken the 5 origin gods. As for when it could return itself, it was completely dependent on the host. You don't need to say anything. If you choose to remain silent, it is equivalent to approving tacitly. I don't know who installed this seal on you, but I have tried many methods which failed, so you cannot blame me. This is already my limit. When Li Yunmu turned around to leave, he suddenly felt the golden enchantment surrounding the pillar of light suddenly explode. The golden box glistened brightly right where it had been, but it was no longer protected. Li Yunmu couldn't help but curiously ask, what happened here? Wasn't this enchantment not opening? How did it open suddenly? System indifferently said. You broke the enchantment of the Dark Master, not me. It's just that it was comparably slow in reacting. How can this be? Li Yunmu almost spat out blood. What sort of broken reason was that? What left him the most speechless was that the seal wasn't as terrifying as the Dark Master had said. He told them that every seal was guarded by vicious beasts, yet Li Yunmu had opened the enchantment and there was no one crazily attacking him. Li Yunmu walked to the golden box and opened it. As expected, there was a card shining brightly inside. Li Yunmu took a deep breath. That should be it. But then what exactly is the metal seal of 2 poles of morning and evening? It's inside the pyramid, but you need the Millennium Divine Staff to open it. Every seal can be opened by the treasure I have left behind. That's why I didn't say anything, but every seal's guardian isn't like these trash guardians of Dark Master's seal. Right when the system finished speaking, a dark falcon descended from the sky. Its flying speed was extremely fast, and instantly attacked Li Yunmu. He dodged, and a bow appeared in his hand. He aimed it at the falcon in the sky and shouted loudly, "Little bastard! Today is the day you die!" Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 arrows rushed out like one and struck the falcon soaring in the sky. It fell to the ground and lost consciousness. Li Yunmu curled his lips and said, "It really is as you said, these guardians of the seals are truly garbage. Your 5 seals, they should be more challenging, right? Otherwise, how could the war god of ancient lands Xingtian not be able to defeat the divine beast protecting it? That is only natural. How could a minor character like the Dark Master be compared to my noble self?" the system said. With the first card in hand, Li Yunmu advanced toward the other 3 seals. He didn't find any difficulty in obtaining them and collected all 4 cards with ease. They had the hands and legs of the Dark Master drawn on them. If they were joined together with eyes in the pyramid, he would again reappear in the human world. The system actually hoped that Li Yunmu would eliminate the seal of Dark Master because then he would be able to obtain the Millennium Divine Staff. The 5 seals could be opened with the Millennium Divine Staff. However, apart from the Fire Seal of Ancient Lands, there were no traces of the others. Besides the people of Ancient Lands, no one else seemed to know about his secret. Li Yunmu then returned to the pyramid and said to the Dark Master, "I have obtained the seals of the 4 cards, but you must agree to a condition of mine first." When Dark Master heard that Li Yunmu had obtained the 4 seals so quickly, he immediately understood that the youth was quite formidable. He couldn't help but get excited. "What condition? If I can do it, I will definitely do it," Li Yunmu calmly said. "Help the gods of 2 poles of morning and evening defeat the dark demon god," Li Yunmu said calmly. Dark Master was silent for a while, then said, "Remove the seal, and I will try. I haven't moved my body for a long time, so I don't know whether it can handle a battle or not." Li Yunmu sensed that Dark Master was quite cunning. When he asked Li Yunmu to find the seals, he said that it was difficult, but when Li Yunmu asked him to defeat the Dark Demon God, he began to make excuses for himself. Chapter 723, Biyao Resurrected. Have you decided? Don't make any excuses before me. You think they will convince me? I can let you go, but can also turn away and leave you sealed. Do you understand that? Actually Li Yunmu only wanted to scare the Dark Master in hopes of using him. If he couldn't control the Dark Master, then the one in trouble would be him. The Dark Master was still hesitant though. Upon noticing that he was still unable to give him a definite answer, Li Yunmu turned around to leave with the 4 golden cards in his hand. As soon as he turned around, the Dark Master began to panic. Dang! Still can't let me go? I will assist you all to eliminate the Dark Demon God. That guy has always been trying to find the opportunity when I am not present to raise to the top, and I am furious at the thought of seeing that evil monster here. When Li Yunmu heard Dark Master agree to his condition, he was satisfied and threw the 4 cards at the shadow in the darkness. When the Dark Master received the 4 golden cards, he began to howl with laughter. His saffron silhouette became increasingly more clear in the darkness, which revealed the shackles on his body. With the seals removed, the shackles all fell off him, and his enormous body appeared outside the pyramid. After throwing away the fetters, the Dark Master began to crazily howl with laughter, and a black light shone in his eyes. I told you long ago that he was a dangerous guy. Removing his restrictions was actually an extremely great risk. The 3 Egyptian gods actually had a way to defeat the Dark Demon God, but they just hadn't discovered it. Li Yunmu didn't care about the threat of the Dark Master. All his focus was on obtaining the Millennium Divine Staff. With it, he could finally resurrect Yuan Biyao. Are you certain about sacrificing half your cultivation just to save that woman? Have you really decided? The system asked with some uncertainty. Sacrificing half one's cultivation was an extremely important matter. If Li Yunmu, who had already reached half-step god level, sacrificed his cultivation, his strength would decrease greatly. It could even get lower than Sage Flux Expert Realm. In the Origin world, if he didn't even possess the strength of a Sage Flux Expert, he would be bullied. It was the standard rule of existence in the Origin world. Li Yunmu nodded. Start talking about the ceremony, which you mentioned before. I have already gotten hold of the divine staff, so I must resurrect Biyao. You are really crazy. The system couldn't help but frown at Li Yunmu, but it was forced to follow his resolve to resurrect Yuan Biyao. Her scattered spirit gradually began to float in mid-air, and the ancient secret method fell on the ground, constantly absorbing the energy floating out of Li Yunmu's body. The system couldn't believe how foolish its host was. He actually chose to sacrifice half his cultivation for a woman. If this news of that got spread through the Origin world, he would become everyone's target. Also, Zeus and Scandinavia's relationship had eased up only because of Li Yunmu. If they learned that he had turned into a waste, why would they care about him anymore? Why would Zeus persevere with trying to have a good relationship with Scandinavia? It was unlikely that he would. There was a greater chance that would go as far as to launch a large-scale attack on Scandinavia. The Earth-attributed Heavenly Gods Council would certainly subdue Water-attributed Scandinavian God Council. Li Yunmu closed his eyes, feeling his strength burn away at a greater temperature. He felt as if there were countless ants crawling up his skin and tormenting him. When the energy he lost entered the ancient secret method, his forehead was already filled with countless sweat beads. Is it worth the trouble? She is only the primordial spirit of ancient secret method, why would you sacrifice half your cultivation for her? The system said while feeling regretful of what was being lost. It didn't understand why Li Yunmu would do something like that, which left it baffled. If any other person was before it, they definitely wouldn't go through with such an action. My host is truly foolish. Who had told the system to choose Li Yunmu back then? Right then, even if it wanted to choose someone else, it was no longer possible. There wasn't enough time, and after staying in Li Yunmu's body for such a long time, the system had grown accustomed and close to him. Li Yunmu felt his body suddenly losing strength and sensed a warm liquid suddenly rise up his throat. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell down to the ground, unconscious. If it were not for the system collecting Yuan Biao's spirit at the final moment and returning it to the ancient secret method, all of Li Yunmu's efforts would have been completely in vain. The ancient secret method began to flicker with light, and a shattered spirit was congealed once more. When the spiritual energy dispersed around, Yuan Biao's naked body appeared on the ground. She was curled in a ball. The Dark Master didn't know what had happened inside. When he regained his form, he howled loudly. "Youngster, I must thank you for helping me by removing the shackles. You have satisfied my request, so now wait for me to fulfill your request. That would be when I will truly gain my freedom." Ha ha ha. After hearing the Dark Master's words, the system didn't offer any reply. Its host had fallen unconscious after losing half his cultivation, which was a real pity. When Yuan Biao awakened, she looked around and said pensively, "Where is this? Shouldn't I have disappeared?" When she discovered that she had no clothes, she quickly congealed green robes for herself. She then saw Li Yunmu lying unconscious on the ground. Li Yunmu, did you save me?" "In order to rescue you, he actually sacrificed half his cultivation," the system said. Yuan Biao looked around, but there was no one else other than Li Yunmu, who was lying unconscious on the ground, around her. Who is speaking? Don't try to find me. I am inside Li Yunmu. Your primordial spirit has been resurrected, but only because of him sacrificing half his cultivation. He's now turned into a 100% garbage in the origin world." The system's voice was filled with a hint of complaint, so how could Yuan Biao not sense it? "I didn't need you to rescue me," she said helplessly. "If I disappeared, then let me stay gone. If it wasn't for Empress Nua's kind disposition, I probably wouldn't have even come to exist in this world. Meeting Li Yunmu was the greatest blessing in my life." Chapter 724, Instant Kill. The time of my happiness was too short, since I had to sacrifice myself for his people, but I hoped that he could live properly. So why would he be so foolish? Why did he rescue me, even sacrificing half his cultivation? Won't he be hunted down by the origin world's powerhouses now? How could the system not know that? Even if it activated the dark state, which amplified the host's power by 10 times, it would not bring about a great result. His strength would only attain Great Circle Sage Flux Expert Realm and nothing more. He wouldn't be the opponent to half-gods, and ancient gods of the origin world even in the dark state. He might even get instantly killed by them. This was why absolute power was the only thing that mattered. Yuan Biao caressed Li Yunmu's cheek while mumbling to herself. "How could you be so foolish?" The system also didn't know why Li Yunmu had done such a thing. It could only wait until he woke up to ask for an explanation. By then, the Dark Master had already rushed to the battlefield above Sand City, where Horus and the 3 Egyptian gods had been beaten down, their bodies already riddled with scars. If the people of Sand City hadn't left, their corpses would have filled the city to the brim. Horus was gasping for breath. They had done their utmost, but the dark demon god in front of them was truly terrifying. At that moment, the 3 Egyptian gods hoped that Li Yunmu would suddenly appear before them and assist them in this their uneven fight. But contrary to their expectations, Li Yunmu did not show up. Instead, the Dark Master's silhouette entered the vision of the 4 ancient gods. The Dark Master? Who removed his seal? When Horus saw the Dark Master descend, he heaved a sigh of relief. If the Dark Master fought on their side, the Dark Demon God would no longer be so terrifying. "Dark Demon God, we have fought a decisive battle a few thousand years ago. If it were not for someone requesting me, I wouldn't have looked for trouble with you once more. But you can only blame your fate to have encountered me. Some couple thousand years ago, the Dark Master had defeated the Dark Demon God. Every god had seen that battle clearly. Because of that, even after several thousand years had passed, every god still thought that Dark Master could easily defeat the Dark Demon God. However, the Dark Demon God suddenly began to howl with laughter. He then revealed a ruthless gaze and said to all the gods as well as Dark Master, "You still think that I am the same dark demon god from that time?" His words shocked everyone. Both of them had been sealed for several thousand years, and both of them also used dark attribute energy, which they had accumulated for several thousand years. According to reason, the Dark Master should still have a higher chance of victory, so why would the Dark Demon God suddenly say such words? When the Dark Master saw that everyone had grown suspicious of his strength, he sneered and suddenly launched a heavy punch. With his enormous saffron body, he struck out with the power that could probably destroy the entire Sand City. The Sky Dragon with Osiris quickly left the smoke-filled battlefield while the winged god dragon took Ra and Horus. The giant soldier brought Geb out of the fight too. They could only watch the battle, which was a calamity for the two poles of morning and evening, from afar. Just a moment ago, what exactly did that dark demon god truly mean? At the moment, Horus looked at Dark Master with an ominous feeling rising in his heart. The apocalyptic punch didn't land on the dark demon god's body. Instead, it was broken by a dark light coming out from his hand. The gazes of the four ancient gods instantly filled with shock. Was that the dark demon god after several thousand years? Ra's gaze was filled with fear. He took a deep breath and said, "Could it be that even Dark Master won't have the strength to defeat this guy?" Ra's heart was full of despair. He had thought that with the Dark Master, they had a chance to defeat the Dark Demon God. But who could have expected that the Dark Master wouldn't be an opponent for the Dark Demon God after so many years had passed? Would they be forced to request the youngster to defeat the Dark Demon God? The Dark Master's eyes were full of incredulity. He was the Dark Master with supreme strength who had defeated the Dark Demon God previously. But after several thousand years, how could everything change upside down? Moron! Do you truly think that I am still at the same level as before? In the past several thousand years, although I have been sealed, I have continued to absorb the human emotions to strengthen myself. Now, as your negative emotions increase, my strength also increase. Ha ha ha! When those weak humans fled, their eyes were filled with fear. The emotion I like the most is fear, ha ha ha, they are my source of strength. Ra looked at the densely packed waves of energy around the dark demon god. It really seemed like their source were the negative emotions. Repulsive dark demon god. He had killed the person who had unsealed him, and he was originally the fiend who terrified the gods and humans of two poles of morning and evening alike. The Dark Master turned somewhat sluggish. Just a moment ago, the Dark Demon God's power had penetrated his body. The Dark Demon God slowly walked toward the Dark Master. Upon getting right in front of him, he slapped him and coldly sneered at him. "You are also the same as these ants, a garbage whose strength hasn't improved even after several thousand years have passed. In my eyes, you aren't worth mentioning." The Dark Master's gaze was filled with fear, which was the reason behind the increase of the Dark Demon God's strength. "Yes, this is what I am looking for, it will make me stronger. My strength will forever remain 100 times stronger than yours, trash." The Dark Master looked disoriented. "All right, I said what I needed to say to you," the Dark Demon God said indifferently. "Now you can die. Disappear, Dark Master." Henceforth, the two poles of morning and evening will only have one darkness-attributed ancient god, and that will be me, the Dark Demon God. A wave of black energy left the Dark Demon God's hand and blowed the Dark Master into smithereens. Not far into the distance, the three Egyptian gods could clearly see the Dark Master, who was just freed from shackles, topple to the ground. "This." Ra didn't dare to say anything. At that moment, the Dark Demon God slowly turned around and shot a mocking gaze at the three gods and Horus. "Now it's your turn. I've had enough fun. You all need to disappear now," he said with a smile. Chapter 725, Regaining Consciousness. Li Yunmu slowly opened his eyes with a head-splitting headache. He felt as if his brain was about to explode. This what happened? Can't you guess that you've been asleep for a very long time?" You really did dare to sacrifice a lot for Yuan Biyao, the system said bitterly. Li Yunmu slowly sat up. When he looked at Yuan Biyao lying in his bosom, his heart began to beat much faster. He was extremely happy to see her resurrected. I don't know what you are planning to do. Was this woman truly worth your sacrifice? Totally worth it. Li Yunmu said without any hesitation. She sacrificed herself for my world as well as my father and mother. Because of that, even if I had to sacrifice my entire cultivation, I would still resurrect her. Loyal. This was the system's only evaluation of Li Yunmu. However, sometimes excessive sentimentality might cause many major matters to fail. A man should be courageous, but also shouldn't be bounded by emotions. Otherwise, sooner or later, they would get shackled by sentiments. The system could only say that a person like Li Yunmu was very suitable to become someone's brother, but if he were to become a regent, the country would be destroyed sooner rather than later because he was too soft-hearted. After deciding that, the system didn't continue talking reason with Li Yunmu. Instead, it said, Millennium Divine Staff still has its final use left. Li Yunmu understood what the system meant by the final use. It could open the metal seal of the two poles of morning and evening. With that in mind, Li Yunmu went to the peak of the pyramid while holding the Millennium Divine Staff and saw a place especially created for it. Should I insert it here? He asked. The system didn't say anything, and Li Yunmu knew that it was tantamount to it agreeing. Once he placed the Millennium Divine Staff inside the dent, the entire pyramid suddenly filled with light. Li Yunmu then hurriedly escaped with Yuan Biyao. The woman was awoken by his action. What? Did something happen? Yuan Biyao opened her eyes and felt greatly excited at seeing that Li Yunmu was safe and sound. You woke up. Yuan Biao's eyes filled with tears. She had been waiting for a long time for him to wake up. I woke up. How do you feel right now? Although your spirit was resurrected, I don't know whether your cultivation was also returned to you or not. Yuan Biyao smiled bitterly. You sacrificed half your cultivation, and you are still concerned about me? How are you so foolish? Li Yunmu smiled. Aren't you also foolish? If you weren't foolish, you wouldn't have sacrificed yourself for my people without any hesitation. I did that for your parents. They were very good to me, so I didn't want to let them down. Yuan Biyao said reluctantly. If this is the case, it seems like you love being the daughter-in-law of my parents. Yuan Biao's face flushed red, and she feigned anger. What do you mean? Li Yunmu gently embraced her and said in a soft voice, nothing, just that you are mine. Yuan Baiao's face turned red like an apple. Enjoying such a small moment of peace was also great. The system coughed in Li Yunmu's heart and said, the metal seal has been opened, so should we go now? Given your strength, let alone speak of removing the seal, you would be instantly killed by the divine beast protecting it. There are both good and bad times, you cannot continue blaming me, Li Yunmu said awkwardly. Yuan Baiao suddenly remembered something and said with some surprise in her voice. Li Yunmu, why don't you come with me to the primordial god world? I know how to help you raise your cultivation. The primordial god world has many places to increase the speed of cultivation. Li Yunmu also knew this, and he replied to her with a smile. All right. We'll go where you say. Only, I seem to have forgotten about something. What? I agreed with the 3 Egyptian gods that after I finish my business, I will go find them. I also wonder whether they encountered some difficulty in dealing with the dark demon god. Since if they did, I'll have to help them. Perfect timing, I also have to tell them the true method to defeat the dark demon god. Li Yunmu laughed lightly. If you knew it from the start, why didn't you say anything to them? Were you waiting until after the Egyptian gods have pitted themselves against him before providing them with help at the perfect time? I only wanted to teach them a lesson and let them know what is called there being a heaven above the heavens. Li Yunmu went toward the Sand City with Yuan Biyao and saw that it had almost been destroyed by then. The Dark Master was nowhere to be seen above the battlefield, which made him frown. Did the Dark Master trick me into removing his seal? He surprisingly chose to not help us deal with the Dark Demon God. Truly wretched. Li Yunmu's sudden descent startled the three Egyptian gods. If he finally took action, then the Dark Demon God would finally be vanquished, right? However, when they felt that the energy inside Li Yunmu's body was very weak, they couldn't help but feel despair. How did the youngster's strength suddenly decrease by so much? What exactly was going on? The system spoke up then to advise the three Egyptian gods through Li Yunmu. If you three Egyptian gods want to defeat the Dark Demon God, you must undergo fusion, creating a new ancient god who can defeat the Dark Demon God. The system's words made the Egyptian gods suspicious, but before they could say anything, Li Yunmu suddenly threw 3 cards toward the sky and said, "This is the opportunity for you to fuse, grasp it properly." The next moment, the Egyptian gods with their winged god dragon, sky dragon, and giant soldier vanished and appeared on the 3 golden cards as images. They blossomed with white light, then suddenly distorted and fused into one. An intense transformation happened in the sky, and Horus, who was watching from nearby, began to shudder. Heaven, what is happening? The 3 gods, they. The Dark Demon God's gaze was filled with incredulity. He ruthlessly looked at Li Yunmu and asked, "Who exactly are you? Why do you have to ruin my matters?" Li Yunmu faintly smiled and said, "I am sorry, Dark Demon God. Since I released you by mistake, I will return you there again." Li Yunmu's voice was filled with provocation, and the world suddenly changed greatly. When the Dark Demon God saw it, a hint of undetectable astonishment appeared in his gaze. Chapter 726, Returning to the Primordial God World. That should be the descent of the legendary creation god? Thunderbolts rolled in the sky while the land cracked. With a dazzling brilliance, the 3 Egyptian gods combined together to form a single entity. It was a beautiful man whose body was snow white, completely different from the dark-colored Dark Demon God. He was the radiant creation god, who was born to destroy the Dark Demon God. The Dark Demon God grew stronger by swallowing the fear and negative emotions of others, while the Light Creation God swallowed the power of everyone's sense of love and justice. Creation God, accept my strength. Horus suddenly shouted with excitement. After him, Li Yunmu also lifted his hand, and when Yuan Biyao saw Li Yunmu do it, she also hurriedly raised her hand and said, "Take mine too." At that moment, the power of love and justice of the world began to congeal around the Light Creation God. When the people of Sand City saw him descend, they also raised their hands one by one. "Take ours too." Everyone's energy combined together and transformed into the Light Creation God's energy, while not far from them, the Dark Demon God's strength began to weaken. You all should be afraid of me. I have already gathered the power of their hope, and their fear has dissipated. The Dark Demon God, you shall disappear." "No. I won't disappear. It's impossible." The Dark Demon God still wanted to struggle, but his body was gradually engulfed by the Light Creation God's power. It was likely that even in death he was unable to understand who exactly was the radiant creation God that had appeared out of nowhere to stop him. However, this secret was only known to the system. Even Li Yunmu didn't know it and could only inquire curiously, "This radiant creation God, is it possible that you created him in the past to deal with the Dark Demon God and the Dark Master?" "You can think of it like that. Originally, he was intended to be the master god of 2 poles of morning and evening, but I felt that his power was somewhat lacking. That's why I divided him into the 3 Egyptian gods," the system replied. Li Yunmu understood that the Dark Demon God had been defeated by the Light Creation God, who had been split into 3 ancient gods long ago. Right then, when the situation required it, he had regained his true appearance and donned his white robes. The Dark Demon God gradually dissipated in the air, turning into black microparticles, but what stunned Li Yunmu was that they were constantly combining. If they were allowed to do it without any hindrance, it was very possibly that they would fuse and form the dark demon god once more. And once he was back, he would bring calamity upon the humans again. This wasn't what Li Yunmei wanted to see, so regardless of the system's opposition, he unleashed the dark state and used the fiend origin to swallow the black particles in the air. What the hell are you doing? Think, this fiend origin mustn't be used so frequently. Do you want to walk the dark path? The system berated him. A glint of black color appeared in the eyes of Li Yunmei, who was absorbing the particles of the dark demon god, and a weird smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. The fiend origin was extremely formidable, and it could throw Li Yunmei onto the path of the devil, which was why the system insisted on him not using it often. But Li Yunmei couldn't hear it. As he continued to use the fiend origin, a dark shadow appeared behind him. It was extremely vicious, but it was very good at hiding itself. The system had warned Li Yunmei countless times to only use the dark state as a last resort. However, its warning seemed to have fallen on empty ears. Li Yunmei couldn't hear the system's words. After he came out of the dark state, he lost consciousness. Yuan Biyao knitted her brows while catching him from falling to the ground. How did he suddenly lose consciousness? While Yuan Biyao supported Li Yunmei, the white light surrounding the body of the radiant creation also gradually disappeared. He soon separated into the three Egyptian gods and their mounts. They were the symbol of the two poles of morning and evening. Ra went to Li Yunmei's side and asked Yuan Biyao with concern, "How is he? How did he suddenly lose consciousness? If it were not for him, we would have been unable to defeat the dark demon god. He just lost consciousness. I will take him to the Eastern Domain." Eastern Domain. At the mention of the Eastern Domain, Ra's eyes filled with dread. He could only think of the primordial god world. The attribute of the gods of the primordial god world allowed them to subdue the gods of two poles of morning and evening. If the great conflict involving the five master gods broke out, the two poles of morning and evening hoped to not encounter the numerous gods of primordial god world as enemies. Do you know about the Eastern Domain? I have some knowledge. Why do you want to take him to the Eastern Domain? He is the benefactor of our two poles of morning and evening, so I want to show my gratitude properly after he awakens. Yuan Biyao couldn't help but knit her brows. He is already like that, so don't bother him. I will quickly return with him to the primordial god world, for only at that place can he heal properly. If you truly want to thank him, then come to the primordial god world. Or perhaps you can allow me to pass on your thanks. Ra shuddered and promptly said, "All right, then express gratitude in our place when he awakens. We cannot go to the primordial god world, so you both take care of yourselves on the way. From now on, if he needs anything from the two poles of morning and evening, just tell us." Yuan Biyao nodded and flew into the sky with the book of the ancient secret method. A beam of light shot out from it, and Li Yunmei and Yuan Biyao disappeared from the two poles of morning and evening. Osiris and Geb also slowly walked over to Ra's side at that moment. How did he know the secret of our two poles of morning and evening? Osiris asked. They had become suspicious of Li Yunmei when he defeated the dark demon god, but Ra did not let that emotion fester in them. It is all because of that being residing in his body. He knows all the secrets of the origin world. Then isn't he omnipotent? Why would he help us? Ra shook his head. That youngster might be kind-hearted? Who knows? In any case, our two poles of morning and evening will never treat friends who helped us unfairly. What should we do now then? Ra took a deep breath and his gaze turned toward Horus, who was standing not far away from them. We shall unify the two poles of morning and evening instead of fighting against each other. Chapter 727, Omen. When Yuan Biyao returned to the primordial god world with Li Yunmei, Fuxi and Nuwa were extremely happy to see them after a whole year had passed. Biyao, you returned? How is your married life going? While pulling Li Yunmei's body, Yuan Biyao said, Emperor Fuxi, Empress Nuwa, Li Yunmu has lost consciousness. I request you to assist him. He went to the 2 poles of morning and evening to save me, and for some reason, he can no longer wake up. Fuxi gave a meaningful glance to Nuwa, who immediately went to Li Yunmu's side and checked the flow of energy in his body as well as whether his meridians were obstructed or not. Her complexion changed slightly while doing that. When she was finished and quickly returned to Fuxi's side, she whispered something in his ear. Yuan Biyao couldn't hear what Fuxi and Nuwa were exactly talking about, but seeing their solemn expressions, it was clear that Li Yunmu's illness wasn't light. She nervously asked, Emperor Fuxi, Empress Nuwa, how is Li Yunmu's condition? I beg you to tell me whether he is all right or not. Nuwa sighed and said to Yuan Biyao, Biyao, you have suffered great hardship in this past year. Yuan Biao's eyes went wide. She didn't feel like a long time had passed since she left the primordial god world, so how come a whole year could have passed? Could it be that a year had passed since her spirit dissipated and was congealed again? Empress Nuwa, how exactly is he? I beg you to tell me. Nuwa sighed. She had been biting her lip from beginning to end and wasn't willing to speak out Li Yunmu's secret in front of everyone. He has lost half his cultivation, do you know? Yuan Biyao vigorously nodded and said, I know that. I also know that he did it to save me. Emperor Fuxi and Empress Nuwa, you must have some method to help me, which is why I brought him to the primordial god world. Biyao, sometimes you cannot act impetuously, Fuxi said indifferently. This man cannot remain to be your husband. If you really want to stay married, then I and Nuwa will find an ideal husband for you. How is he? Why cannot he continue to be my husband? Tell me clearly. I don't want anyone else, I only want Li Yunmu. He sacrificed half his cultivation for me, so why can't I make a small sacrifice for him as well? We truly love each other. When Yuan Biyao said the last line, she began to choke with emotions. Originally, she had intended to beg Fuxi and Nuwa to let them enter the primordial region. She was convinced that with increased speed of cultivation, he would regain his cultivation in a few days and she wouldn't need to feel guilty anymore. So when she heard Fuxi and Nuwa's words, when they told her that they wouldn't give shelter to Li Yunmu, she was shocked. What exactly was going on? Seeing Yuan Biao's become increasingly more emotional, Fuxi and Nuwa began to frown. They had watched her grow up, and they had always considered her to be their daughter. Yet she actually dared to rebel against them for Li Yunmu, which left them astonished. Biyao, don't talk rudely. Me and Nuwa have watched over you from childhood, and we are only doing this for you. Why exactly, I beg you to tell me. Upon seeing Yuan Biao's resolution, Nuwa could no longer keep it hidden. Biyao, he has stepped on the path of devil cultivation. If the primordial god world shelters him, we will attract a disaster that will destroy our whole world. Yuan Biyao didn't dare to believe that Empress Nuwa, who had always been kind-hearted, would surprisingly say such a despairing thing. Li Yunmu had begun to walk the devil path. He had only wanted to use the ancient secret method to save his people and sacrificed half his cultivation to save her, so how could he have become a devil cultivator? If that truly happened, then it would be all because of her. Since Fuxi and Nuwa weren't willing to take him in, then she also wouldn't continue to stay in the primordial god world. From then on, wherever Li Yunmu went, she would follow without any regret for her decision. Yuan Biyao wiped her eyes and said, then Emperor Fuxi, Empress Nuwa, this Biyao won't trouble you anymore. Sorry for everything. If you aren't willing to give shelter to Li Yunmu, then this Biyao cannot continue staying in the primordial god world. Goodbye. Biyao. You. Fuxi and Nuwa were startled. They hadn't expected that Yuan Biyao would be infatuated to the point that she was even willing to leave the primordial god world forever. Biyao. You idiot, you will regret it later. You are the ancient secret method and belong to the ancient lands. If you persist on going the wrong way, Don't blame us for being merciless. Yuan Biyao has already died once, I don't fear death. However, I cannot bear to watch you two, who are the leaders of the ancient lands, acting like spectators. I let you down, but many thanks for taking care of me for so many years. Biyao can't thank you enough, but Li Yunmu is my everything right now. If you are unable to accept him, that means you are also unable to accept Biyao. Henceforth, this Biyao doesn't belong to the primordial god world anymore. Yuan Biyao calmly took Li Yunmu away from the palace hall. You. For a moment, Fuxi didn't know what he should say. He also didn't know whether it was Yuan Biao's obsession or just that he had the wrong idea. Nuwa, are we really mistaken? He couldn't help but ask. I don't know. But I also don't feel that youngster is someone who would let himself fall to this degree. Yet inside his body, I felt a demonic being congealing. For some reason, the youth fell to the devil path in an instant. Then why not directly eliminate the root of the problem, so as to avoid troubles in the future? Because that child Biyao will definitely stop us. It might cause a calamity to fall on the ancient lands, and the gains will definitely not make up for the losses. Even if Li Yunmu has entered the devil path, as long as he doesn't influence the ancient lands, I won't cause trouble for him. After all, he is Biao's husband. You are extremely benevolent, but it is really hard for that child Biyao. If I knew when I saw him for the first time that he would stray to the devil path and influence the interests of ancient lands, I would have killed him without any hesitation. Hearing Nuwa's words, Fuxi couldn't help but sigh and say with gloominess, what was that? When Yuan Biyao took Li Yunmu out of the ancient lands, she felt a deep heartache. The primordial god world was home to her, and right then, she was leaving it for all time. It felt like a dream to her. Chapter 728, Storming the City. Ever since Li Yunmu had devoured the other planes, the only remaining plane was the plane with Lucky Wind City. After enduring this baptism, the experts from other planes had gradually reached its earth. On it, they chose to wait for opportunity while accumulating their strength to take revenge against the person who destroyed their world. Li Yunmu had left his earth long ago, so all the experts who wanted vengeance gradually turned their attention to Lucky Wind City. It had been peaceful for a very long time. Ever since the frontline Heaven's Master and Divine Religion's Pope had been vanquished by Lin Yuero, there was no power on earth who dared to challenge it. But after Li Yunmu devoured the other planes, countless experts of the other 65 planes had descended to his world. Availing themselves to the opportunity of Li Yunmu not being present, they formed a vengeance squad, which was extremely powerful. Although it didn't have many people, the weakest of them possessed the strength of a domain sage. Those experts were watching Lucky Wind City like a tiger. They were led by a powerful man called Cass, who had come after Li Yunmu destroyed his world and formed the vengeance squad. In addition to the newcomers, the squad allowed powers of Earth who had been previously defeated by Li Yunmu and weren't willing to accept the outcome join their side. Lucky Wind City could thus be considered to be faced with the most dangerous crisis since its formation, and Lin Yuero was still in the dark about it. She thought that the experts of the other planes had disappeared after their worlds were devoured. But who could have expected that they would surprisingly reach Earth and wait in the shadows for the opportunity to strike? City Lord, recently we've felt as if the calm of the world has been disrupted, as if all the others' powers have started becoming restless. Lin Yuero took a deep breath, and said, reinforce our guards so that our enemies cannot conduct a sneak attack. City Lord, our world is the only one remaining, right? Have the experts of the other planes really been devoured? But then why I keep hearing that they have entered our world? Lin Yuero shook her head. I am also not very clear about it, but it would be better if we are a little more careful. Although the status of the present Lucky Wind City is different from before, we cannot lower our guard. Lin Yuero reminded Li Yun to remain on guard regarding Lucky Wind City's defenses. If they didn't utilize the defense system of Lucky Wind City properly, then all the other powers would find the opportunity they had been waiting for. Lucky Wind City's defense right then wasn't as weak as before. After the attack of Frontline Heavens and Divine Religion, Linuero had raised the level of the defense system in the city. When Lucky Wind City's defenses were unleashed, it would be as secure as if protected by a wall of metal and a moat of boiling water. At that moment, every bush and every tree outside Lucky Wind City was covered with enemies. The experts who had come from different parallel planes were advancing under the lead of Cass. Lord Cass, the defenses of the Lucky City are said to be invulnerable. Breaking it won't be easy. What should we do? Cass sneered at him. You think I have some better method? Sire, you are skilled, so you definitely would have some other method, right? Storm their defenses head on. As Cass spat out those words, the other experts were gobsmacked. They felt that they had chosen a wrong leader. Cass surprisingly chose the stupidest method. The defenses of Lucky Wind City had been improved greatly, and they were said to have reached an impregnable state. Didn't their leader understand how disastrous would their casualties be if they stormed the Lucky Wind City head-on? Everyone's resolve began to waver, and none of them were willing to obey the commander. After all, who wouldn't get reluctant when their commander chose to deliver them to their deaths? What? Not willing to attack? Or do you guys don't want vengeance any longer? All right. Since you don't want vengeance, quickly disperse. I will settle the debt with Lucky Wind City by myself. You all surprisingly dare to question my commands. It isn't that we want to question your command, but that the method chosen by you doesn't seem any different from sending ourselves to our deaths. Sending yourself to death? Have you tried it? Since you haven't tried it, then you mustn't rashly arrive at a conclusion. Cass kept arguing with the powerful people who were previously defeated by Li Yunmu and weren't willing to accept the outcome. In the end, they didn't part on bad terms, but rather those powers which originally belonged to the earth chose to compromise. After all, they had chosen Cass as their commander because they believed in his abilities. When they reached the battlefield, if everyone didn't choose to believe their commander, then how could their attack succeed? Cass saw that those people who previously didn't agree with his decision could be convinced, so he slowly explained his thoughts. Do you all really think that their defense system is that formidable? They're only putting on a false front. Within 1 day's time, I guarantee that their defenses will be completely broken. Do you all know why I wasn't doing anything for some time? I was training a group of elites. As long as they enter Lucky Wind City, I dare to assure you that they will massacre everyone inside it and all of us will get our revenge. Everyone half doubted and half believed Cass' words, but the confidence and bravery displayed by him caused many people to admire him. Thus, they chose to believe in him. As he had stated, Cass began to attack Lucky Wind City, and sure enough, as he had said, despite the defenses of Lucky Wind City having been upgraded to another level, they crumbled under Cass' assault. After that, a large-scale attack was launched on Lucky Wind City. The first squad had many powerful experts and was formed by the elites which Cass was talking about. They completely suppressed the supreme transcending experts of Lucky Wind City. As for the people of the other powers, they were all slightly weaker. Their perfectly coordinated attacks had caused the Lucky Wind City's defenses to crumble, putting the city in great peril. When Linuero heard about what had happened, she couldn't remain sitting. She immediately walked out of the city lord's manor and asked Li Yun, "What the hell is happening? How could they break Lucky Wind City's defenses so easily, given that they had almost reached the next level?" Chapter 729, Weakness. Enemy attacked head-on. Their assault was excessively intense, and our people couldn't put up a response, so our defenses were destroyed by them. Linuero took a deep breath. She realized that they had encountered a formidable opponent. Who exactly is it that attacked Lucky Wind City? Have you investigated it? These formidable enemies include the subordinates of previously defeated Blade Master and Battle God. As for the people leading them, there's no information about them. They don't seem to have existed anywhere. What? No information? What does that mean? It is possible that they are from other planes. Lin Yuero's eyes filled with astonishment. The arrival of the people from the other planes had suddenly triggered a great crisis, which was an extremely unfortunate news for Lucky Wind City. They had to take action immediately, otherwise, Lucky Wind City might truly fall. At that time, the entire city would sink into a dangerous crisis. After learning about the crisis of Lucky Wind City, Lin Yuero intended to immediately declare war on the unknown forces. The surroundings of Lucky Wind City were filled with smoke and debris. After Lin Yuero reached the city wall and observed the enemy position, she calmly gave a few commands. I will first use illusions to trap them. Dispatch a squad to encircle and annihilate them. Let's give them a show of our strength. Since they could break our defenses, we cannot underestimate their strength. We mustn't treat them as ordinary enemies like before. Yes. Everyone agreed in unison and immediately poured their heart and mind into preparing for the explosive offense. Lin Yuero's gaze focused upon the enemy camp not far away. Moments later, golden light shone on her forehead, and the enemy base was suddenly surrounded by an enchantment. Everyone inside it sunk into dormancy. As the illusion god, Lin Yuero could freely use mythical lands and create illusions, forcing her enemies to lose themselves in the illusions. When the enemy camp was caught within the illusion, it sunk into chaos. Many of the people panicked, since they were faced with something completely different from what they had experienced before. What is this? Where are we all? Everyone scattered in all directions. The place was terrifying, and they didn't want to die. At this time, Cass sneered at everyone. He seemed to have noticed something no one else did. You useless people, these are just illusions. You can't even overcome illusions, so how could you hope to stand at the peak of the earth in the future? Humph, ants. In front of everyone's eyes, Cass' hands began to shine brightly, and the next instant, the enchantment around them was destroyed. Boom! The mythical realm suddenly disappeared, and Lucky Wind City appeared in front of everyone. They heaved a sigh of relief and promptly thanked Cass. Lord Cass, you truly are ferocious, we still think are. Cass sneered at them again. Continue attacking, don't give Lucky Wind City an opportunity to catch a breath. Wait a moment, while we were in the mythical realm, they would have definitely dispatched a squad to launch a sneak attack. Everyone, go and annihilate it. The former subordinates of Blade Master and Battle God were startled by Cass' calm voice and his command. Was that how a true commander on a battlefield looked like? They promptly agreed to his command. Good, 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 immediately we will immediately do it. Just a moment ago, Cass had displayed his strength and gained everyone's confidence. After that, they became willing to obey his commands. Not far away, Lin Yuero suddenly felt as if someone heavy had fallen on her body, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. The numerous soldiers and officers standing beside her shouted out loudly, "City Lord, what happened?" Lin Yuero shook her head. Nothing. I encountered an expert who destroyed my mythical realm. Quickly, recall the people whom we sent to attack. The enemy is extremely vigilant. This would just be sending them to their deaths. Lin Yuero's words caused the people around her to become somewhat anxious. They had unexpectedly encountered such ferocious opponents, which was completely out of Lin Yuero's expectations. But right then wasn't the time to think about it. Since the enemy could eliminate her mythical realm, their strength would definitely be very high. Lin Yuero took a deep breath. It seems like Lucky Wind City has encountered an enormous crisis this time. Gradually, Li Yunmu awakened from his coma. However, he didn't know that Lucky Wind City had encountered a crisis and that Lin Yuero had met with a thorny opponent. After he awakened, Li Yunmu was continuously berated by the system. Do you want to die? Even if you want to die, don't take me with you. How many times have I told you to use the fiend origin less? Why wouldn't you hear me? When Li Yunmu saw the system flipping out in anger, he replied weakly. The dark demon god's microparticles were showing signs of joining together, and I also discovered that they could enter the human body, stay there, and breed. I used the fiend origin for the people of two poles of morning and evening. Only fiend origin could absorb the dark attributed microparticles, like it absorbed that demonic being of Dragon Silk Palace. You are truly crazy, the system cried out. Li Yunmu stuck out his tongue and noticed that his lip was somewhat cracked. Just this once. The system began to sweat inwardly. How was its host any good? He was too kind-hearted. Although it wasn't wrong, it would ultimately hurt him one day. Every person or god had a weak point, which was a fact. Li Yunmu's weakness was just more conspicuous than most people's. He was simply too kind-hearted. He would always think about others before himself. With this sort of attitude, he wouldn't be able to survive in the origin world where danger lurked everywhere. Li Yunmu slowly stood up and discovered that he was in a cave. When Yuan Biyao entered and saw that Li Yunmu had awakened, she couldn't help feeling pleasantly surprised. You finally woke up. Great. Li Yunmu frowned. How did we end up here? Weren't we going to the Primordial God world? Chapter 730, Trash. Yuan Biyao didn't know how to explain what had happened to Li Yunmu. How could she tell him that Fuxi and Nuwa were suspicious of him and didn't want him to stay in the Primordial God world? Words could not come out Yuan Biao's mouth. She simply didn't know what to say. Noticing Yuan Biao's awkwardness, Li Yunmu couldn't help but talk to the system. I was only asleep for a short time, so what exactly happened? The system was silent for a moment before it said, Fuxi and Nuwa were suspicious of you because of the fiend origin in your body. They thought that you had fallen to the devil path. What? Could it be that this is the side effect of fiend origin which you were talking about? I reminded you previously. Since the primordial god world isn't willing to help you, you'll have to think of a way to restore your cultivation by yourself. Of course, you use the demonic being in your body to increase your cultivation, but then you'll definitely fall to the devil path, as Fuxi and Nuwa were worried about. Devil path? Li Yunmu frowned, then suddenly began to laugh. Fuxi and Nuwa could really change their opinions about people very easily. Right then, perhaps everyone in the world would consider him as evil. Yet he had never wanted to cultivate the devil path and had only unleashed the fiend origin to help. Why couldn't anyone give him the benefit of the doubt? Even supreme ancient gods like Fuxi and Nuwa unexpectedly misunderstood him. If it were not for Yuan Biyao protecting you, you would have been killed by Fuxi and Nuwa, the system added after a moment. What? They also wanted to kill me. Li Yunmu's heart was crushed. Without learning about the true facts, the two ancient gods had surprisingly made up their minds to kill him. What irony! When Yuan Biyao saw the changes on Li Yunmu's face, she forced herself to smile and say, Primordial God world has its own regulations. Emperor Fuxi and Empress Nuwa were very busy, so we should find some other way. I am afraid that we won't be able to go to the Primordial God world for some time. You don't need to hide it. The being in my body told me everything. Li Yunmu's face was ashen, but it was his words that startled Yuan Biyao. She bit her lip, then said, I am sorry, Li Yunmu. Before Yuan Biyao could finish, she was embraced by Li Yunmu, which shocked her. Thank you so much. Biyao, when other people abandoned me, you chose to believe in me and were willing to stand on my side. Fuxi and Nuwa were your benefactors who had raised you, yet you would rather break your relationship with them instead of abandoning me. I will engrave this kindness in my heart. Yuan Biyao gave him a grateful smile and lowered her head in shyness before saying softly, It's nothing. I only don't want to see you die. After all, you saved my life. Li Yunmu knew that Yuan Biyao was pretending. She cared about him a lot, but chose to act very aloof. What concerned his fall from grace, he wanted to hide it from the gods of Olympus and Asgard. If the news of the drop in his strength spread outside, the Western world would definitely sink into chaos. Strangely, however, there was no information about the 8 of Southern Fields Lanlu region, as if some conspiracy was going on. It left Li Yunmu feeling restless. While holding Yuan Biyao, Li Yunmu said to her, "Since they felt that I had fallen to the devil path, then they will get exactly that." The system actually understood the reason behind why Li Yunmu chose that. Anyone else in his place would have felt despair. When they first met, Fuxi and Nuwa were extremely respectful to him. However, because he used the energy of fiend origin, they expelled him from the primordial god world. No one would be able to understand such an action. Yuan Biyao was stumped. She couldn't help but ask, "What do you want? You truly want to cultivate the devil path? Emperor Fuxi and Empress Nuwa won't let you off easily. You cannot do that. I have no choice but to do this, otherwise, I will die a miserable death." Li Yunmu's words startled Yuan Biyao, since she didn't have a clear understanding of his circumstances. Right then, he could be said to be a target of a multitude of arrows. As long as the information of his strength weakening spread, many parties would rush over to threaten his life. His enemies included the rising intelligence organization of the origin world, which had showed up in place of Underworld Serpent. They were actually busy searching for information about him. It could be said that they were the first ones to obtain the important information about the great decrease in his strength. Once they obtained it, they began to spread it through the Western world, and soon the entire origin world knew that Li Yunmu had turned into a trash. Upon hearing it, the gods of the 8 from Southern Fields Lanlu region as well as Olympus began to get restless. The two poles of morning and evening had unified, but after receiving Li Yunmu's favor, they wouldn't take advantage of his misfortune. Regardless of how much Zeus persuaded Ra to make an alliance for war, he was met with Ra's refusal. While the two poles of morning and evening were in their most difficult times, none of the other powers had offered any help to them. Only Li Yunmu had defeated the dark demon god for them, which resulted in the two poles of morning and evening unifying themselves. Ra was someone who remembered the kindness shown by others. Since Li Yunmu had aided them in time of need, they would etch it deep into their heart. When they were offered a choice, they would stand at Li Yunmu's side without any hesitation. "This is our best opportunity to defeat Scandinavia. You cannot miss it," Zeus advised Ra, hoping he could change his mind. However, Ra was already out of Zeus' control. At this time, a hint of coldness appeared in Zeus' eyes. "Ra, we have maintained cordial relations all along, so you mustn't force us to take action. When we, the two poles of morning and evening, were at our most difficult times, did you, Zeus, remember our alliance? Or help us deal with the traitors? What you didn't do, Li Yunmu did for us. Now you ask us to betray him? Haha, dream on," Ra said in reply. "You don't refuse a toast only to drink it in defeat. Our heavenly gods' council won't tolerate anyone setting themselves against us. What preposterous thing are you talking about? Some time ago, you had married your own daughter to Li Yunmu to deal with him. Yet now that his strength has weakened, you intend to kick him when he is down? You are a truly petty person."